What is going on, everybody? We are officially at the midway point of the 2023 NFL season. I thought it was as good a time as ever to refresh my quarterback rankings, where I'm at with all the QBs in the NFL, lumping these guys into tiers and opening up the conversation on these guys. So it's going to be a fun one. Please do hit that like button as we dive in here, and let's get started. So I have 6 tiers here, and these guys are going to be ranked ascending from right to left, by the way. But let's start in our bottom tier, our tier 6, and 2 of these tiers are split into subcategories here. So tier 6 is going to be your backup quarterbacks in general, and then I split these into your kind of developmental traits-based prospects and your more like spot starters, guys that can maybe pop in and win you a game, your more competent backups, if you will. Now, I tried to include every single relevant quarterback in this video here, and that means Aiden O'Connell does need to be discussed briefly here. Now, I want to be clear. At this point in time, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think Aiden O'Connell is either of these categories here. I don't see him as a developmental QB necessarily, developmental in the sense that he might be a career backup type, but not a developmental like potential starter type, as even a Jaren Hall for the Vikings. Like, he at least can move and has an arm. O'Connell is a 25-year-old prospect who's not a great athlete, does not have a great arm, and when he's played, he hasn't even shown to be a competent backup, in my opinion. So I'm not trying to slam Aiden O'Connell. It's just, I wanted to include every relevant quarterback here. He is relevant as he's been named the starter by the owner, but I don't necessarily think this is going to be pretty in terms of his on-field performance. But yeah, there's a bunch of names here in the backup tier. I don't need to necessarily talk about all these guys. Some of them are more self-explanatory than others. And there's probably some names in terms of competent backups that I didn't even include here. But I do want to talk about the guys that I feel are interesting, at least. So Jaren Hall for the Vikings, I think we just kind of alluded to him. We'll see what he looks like. It looks like he's going to get an opportunity ahead of Josh Dobbs coming into Minnesota. He's got some tools. He's got a fun release. He had some good highlights at BYU, but from a down-to-down consistency thing, I'm not a huge believer. We'll see what he can do. Malik Willis also in this still kind of developmental tier. There was all these reports about, he's ahead of Will Levis on the depth chart, and he's taken strides, over the offseason, because when we saw him play last year, it was horrible. They had to pick up Josh Dobbs off the street and start him that week because he couldn't even run the offense. And I think when we saw him come in that London game, it was kind of the same deal against the Ravens. So, still has the traits, but it does feel like that's fading away for him. And then Trey Lance is probably the most fascinating guy here, in this tier at least. I can't really explain what happened in San Francisco. Shanahan kind of beats to his own drum. Clearly, Trey Lance doesn't have the kind of timing and sped-up processor to run Kyle Shanahan's offense that he feels like a Brock Purdy, a Mac Jones can run better than a Trey Lance, and he's kind of proven that out to be true. It doesn't mean Trey Lance couldn't still have a bright future in a different type of system with a different coach, but you'd be an idiot to say it's not kind of suspect that Trey Lance, with all of his tools, couldn't run the system that we all view as the most quarterback-friendly system in the league. So I do think he's kind of entered this just developmental backup. We'll see what happens. Anything you get from him is house money. I wouldn't be surprised if he works out, but definitely not betting on it at this point in time. Then you got all your kind of capable backups here. Not a ton of guys worth spending too much time on here. Josh Dobbs, I think some people might argue for him as a fringe starter because he's been starting so many games lately. I think that's very much based on the first 2 games of his season here for Arizona that was very much predicated on some big runs from Josh Dobbs. Really, the last 3-4 weeks, he's been an unwatchable quarterback. He's been spraying throws. He's been forcing bad decisions. The Cardinals were so happy to just get something for Josh Dobbs. So, he can do some fun stuff. He's a good dude off the field, but I can't buy into the excitement for Josh Dobbs at this point. Carson Wentz still sitting out there in the, the free agent block. I still think he could be at this level. Like, I know it's easy to trash on Wentz because of the turnovers, but he still has some likable traits in terms of his physical tools. And then Desmond Ridder in this tier, he's going to be a fascinating conversation here. You actually will see Taylor Heineke ranked above him. Look, I've never seen it with Desmond Ridder in terms of starting caliber traits. This is part of the reason I didn't like Atlanta drafting him in the first place when they did, because it was like he's probably going to play okay enough for them to want to see what he can do, and then it's going to detract them from investing in a better quarterback option, and then we're going to be sitting there 2 years from when he was drafted, and they're still going to need a quarterback. And that's played out exactly as I had kind of predicted there for the Falcons. You know, with Ridder, the first thing that comes to mind is it does not have natural pocket presence. The rush just, it's like deer in the headlights. Like, he just does not have that comfort level dealing with pressure. But also, he misses throws once or twice a game. It's kind of Jimmy Garoppolo-esque, where it's like every throw looks good, and then all of a sudden he's just completely spraying a ball over the middle of the field, and sometimes it gets picked. But that's the other thing, is the turnovers with Desmond Ridder. If the idea was he's going to have this good processor and kind of be this, nice baseline, almost Alex Smith level passer, well, Alex Smith protected the football. Desmond Ridder has a hard time getting through any given game, turning the football over. So I know he's kind of like, they're saying he's got a concussion, and it's kind of shady behind the scenes what's going on there with Desmond Ridder. Turning to Taylor Heineke here, I don't know. I think Heineke's a tick above Ridder at this point in time. Then I've got Zach Wilson down in this tier. You could argue Zach Wilson should be in the developmental backup category, but I think he's played at a good enough level that he at least belongs with these kind of capable backups. And also, do I really believe Zach Wilson's going to turn around and be a full-time starter someday? Probably not. But I do think he's shown that he can have some moments within a game, and he's definitely an interesting player. I feel like we're still collecting information on Zach Wilson. Then Tyrod Taylor, who's played very well for the Giants. Got to give him some love. And then Sam Darnold. I was kind of pulling for him to play in that Niners game against the Bengals, just to kind of see what he looks like in that Niners system. Brock Purdy gets out there. But I do think Sam Darnold showed some stuff for the Panthers last year and is still kind of hanging around as an interesting name. Now, before we get to our next tier here, I want to tell you guys about Factor. They reached out to me about 2 months ago. I've been trying Factor, and it has truly changed my lifestyle for the best. If you're anything like me, you're always busy, you're not really much of a chef, and even if you are, you might not have time to run to the grocery store, prep your meals, cook your meals, all that stuff, make sure you got the whole recipe right, yada yada. I just have never had the time in my life to do that, even if I want to eat healthy and live a healthy lifestyle. Well, Factor has been the perfect answer to that. Factor sends fresh, never frozen meals straight to your door. You throw them in the microwave, they're ready in 2 minutes, and this is better than anything I could cook at home. I was just blown away with how fresh my first chicken meal was. It just tasted like a home-cooked meal. And right now, this fall, maybe a hot take here, but I'm not the biggest turkey guy, so I appreciate that they've got some options right now that are fall-inspired, like cranberry pecan chicken and apple Dijon pork chops. Big fan of those. But all in all, man, Factor is a true game changer for any of you that live a healthy lifestyle or want to just eat healthier in general and want a more convenient way to do that. And right now, if you head to factor75.com, click the link below, use promo code TFG50. They'll give you 50% off your first box of meals. Could not recommend Factor enough. I've just been blown away with the product. Wouldn't tell you about it if I wouldn't endorse it myself. So check it out, and let's get back to it. Let's get into the next tier here, your fringe starters. These are quarterbacks 26 through 32, more or less, that by nature of being that level of quarterback, there's only so many starting jobs to go around. Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, Jacoby Brissett, who I think the last time we saw him play showed that he belongs at least as a starter in the NFL. Gardner Minshew, Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo, Ryan Tannehill. Do I really need to spend more time on these guys? I feel like all these players, we kind of know who they are, their capped ceilings. And yeah, I want to move on. And analyzing these guys at this point in 2023 feels like we are probably all in agreement as far as where these guys are at. Then we've got tier 4, which is, your starting caliber quarterbacks who, it's kind of your average bridge quarterbacks, guys that you kind of know aren't the answer, but they're good enough to be a starter week in, week out, blended in with all of these kind of high upside prospects that are playing because of their traits. And Let's start with tier 4B, which are those high upside prospect types. 2 or 3 of these guys will probably someday be top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, if not more than that. But we don't necessarily know who that's going to be because there's just so much to play out for these guys. I will say the bottom 2, especially here with Jordan Love and Justin Fields, I'm feeling more and more confident that neither of them are ever going to be top 10 quarterbacks, though both these guys, I think, have some baseline of traits that could give them at least kind of being quality starters in time. So Jordan Love definitely belongs at the bottom of this tier with how he's playing right now. Number one, his accuracy problems, like he just cannot hit the broadside of the barn, and that is a huge problem. The other thing is 3 of the last 4 weeks, he's made just painful, boneheaded decisions with the football. Now, he's in his 6th start, and some of these other quarterbacks make boneheaded decisions with the football too. That's why they're in this prospect tier. But you combine those 2 things together, and it's like that's a lot to work on for Jordan Love for him to become some great quarterback someday. But I do think those things have made it easy to overlook, the fact that he's out there with a horrible group of wide receivers. That last week's performance, especially against the Vikings, 4 drops, one of which was ripped out of the receiver's hands on a good throw from Love for an interception, and just no run after catch, 0 for 7 on contested catches. He's out there by himself, and their pass protection hasn't been particularly good either. So that's been tough on Jordan Love. But I also think his pocket presence is pretty damn good, and that's something that can raise the floor for him. If he's able to navigate pressure and do some good stuff when the rush gets in, there's some good stuff there. And he's shown good flashes of, getting the ball out and processing in general, minus the kind of stupid mistakes. So I'm not completely writing off Jordan Love, but it definitely has not been pretty the last month or so. And then Justin Fields, man, it's just been more of the same this year, where he's not throwing with anticipation. He wants to use his feet too much. And while that's great, and he can do things that most of the quarterbacks on this entire list can't do, he doesn't do things that 90+% of the quarterbacks on this list do consistently. And that's, hey, you've got a slant entering the hole in the zone. Throw the ball, let it rip. Like, don't take bad sacks. Like, there's just so many things that Justin Fields does that are frustrating and lowers his ceiling into this tier. Definitely feels like he is done in Chicago. He might get back on the field and get a chance to basically play the Bears out of a top 2 pick, which might force their hand to give him another year. But he's going to have to start playing better, man. Then we've got Sam Howell, who's impressed me this year. I think you look at his processing, it's been pretty good. Clearly has a good control of that offense, can get from 1 to 2 quickly. He's got a strong arm. He's really good at improvising, breaking sacks, getting out of the pocket. He's got a defining weakness as well, though, and that's just he doesn't want to let a play die. He takes way too many sacks. He puts his team behind the 8 ball. It's been a little bit better the last couple of weeks. Maybe he can continue to improve upon that. But I mean, when you're consistently putting your team in 2nd and 18, 2nd and 20 because you couldn't throw the ball away or get out of the pocket or whatever, that's going to hold your entire offense and yourself back. But he's done a lot of good stuff. I think he's still growing. Never should have fallen to the 5th round. Definitely belongs in this tier. Then how about Will Levis, man? Levis looking really good the last couple of weeks. Talk about never should have fallen in the draft as much as he did. I thought Levis was right there with these next 3 quarterbacks on this list as a true first-round talent. I liked all 4 of these quarterbacks, and I think all 4 of them have looked pretty good as far as rookies are concerned. Levis is out there with a horrible offensive line. I love the way he's been able to kind of manage pressure and kind of do the opposite of Sam Howell and not take too many sacks. He's been relatively accurate as well, which was an issue on his college tape. Levis just has been really impressive, and I'm excited to see him the rest of the way. If you have not watched my Will Levis film breakdown from his rookie debut, I highly encourage it. Then Anthony Richardson, he's at risk of Levis passing him up just because of the injury, but Richardson really looked the part when he played. I mean, we knew the physical tools were going to be impressive, and some of the throws he's made with his velocity and the arm talent have been just like, wow. But I think his processing was pretty good in terms of a rookie entering the league, let alone the fact that that was supposed to be one of his big knocks. He himself has some accuracy stuff that hopefully he can clean up, and hopefully he can get back healthy from the shoulder injury next year. But definitely was encouraged by the very small sample size we saw from Anthony Richardson. Then I've got Bryce Young, who I will say he had a slow start, was making some big mistakes the first couple of weeks, as himself and the Carolina Panthers had no identity and no idea how they wanted to move the ball. But the last 3+ weeks, he's much more looked the part. He's elevated that offense to competency, I would say. He's working with an Adam Thielen, having him have one of the best years of his career. You see in that they get their first win this week against the Texans, like improvising, doing some of the stuff he did at Ohio State at a much higher level in the NFL now, because that was supposed to be a big thing with him, right? Was his play extension and his kind of Burrow-esque Mahomesian instincts to throw on the move and create. Starting to see some of that show up. So he's at least avoided being tagged a bust by so many people, I think, and kind of survived a horrible surrounding situation, and he's impressed. But no denying that CJ Stroud has entered the league at a higher floor than Bryce Young. Now, I do think he's had a better surrounding cast in terms of the on-field production in Houston. You look at the, on paper, and you say Bryce might even be better, but you look at actually how the O-line and these receivers like Nico Collins and Tank Dell are playing for CJ Stroud, and he's definitely had a fairly friendly entry, but it hasn't all been perfect, of course. Like, they have no run game in Houston, but either way, CJ Stroud has brought a lot of the stuff that we expected in terms of the kind of like Jared Goff and Dak Prescott comps, where you give him a clean pocket, an open receiver. He is beautiful in terms of his footwork, getting the ball on time with accuracy. That was never a doubt with him. Where he has really impressed me, though, and what has led me to raise him over Bryce Young right now, is his ability under pressure, at least to sense pressure and extend plays and move against the rush. For the majority of his college tape, I did not like what I saw from CJ Stroud when he actually got pressured behind that incredible Ohio State offensive line. And then there was the one Georgia game where he actually looked really good. And it was hard to know, how much weight do you put into the Georgia game? How much weight do you put in the rest of his Ohio State career? And it turns out what we saw in that Georgia game was much closer to the poised passer under pressure than what we kind of saw the rest of his career. So, CJ Stroud going to be at the top of the kind of prospect list, pulling for all these guys, and they'll definitely be moving all over the place. Some of these guys are going to drop into the backup tiers over the next couple of years. Some of them are going to be shooting up into the good to great tier. So then we got your bridge starters. Similar to your fringe starters, I don't really want to spend that much time on these guys. We feel pretty good about who they are. Daniel Jones, I've defended him over the years, and he gets the big contract. One that, I understand why the Giants did it after the year he had last year, but man, it does not look good right now when they put Tyrod Taylor in and things look better. I think, Jones is a quarterback that needs some semblance of pass protection out there. He does not have a lick of pocket presence, and when you take away Andrew Thomas and the rest of the offensive line as a turnstile, he's just a sitting duck back there, whereas Tyrod can manipulate the pressure and get out a little bit. But I don't want to just forget about what he did last year. He did earn that contract. I think, he throws a really good ball in the short to intermediate game. He does read defenses. He showed he can avoid mistakes last year. He at least belongs in this tier until proven otherwise. But the Giants, I think, probably regret that contract and wish maybe it would have been more of a franchise tag decision with him. Then he got Mac Jones, similar with Daniel Jones. He has the majority of this season and going back to last year had a horrible opportunity around him. This year, it's been a lot of just piss poor pass protection, but the playmakers have been bad. The play calling last year, just horrible. I think if you drop Mac Jones into a lot of other teams that are more stable, you'd see him look at least like Daniel Jones, like Kenny Pickett, like Derek Carr. Maybe that's defending him too much, but in the games where the pass protection holds up for the Patriots and the receivers are able to make some plays, Mac Jones plays pretty well still. So I feel pretty comfortable putting him in this tier. And then you got Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett's been kind of exactly as advertised. I think in terms of his processing, it's pretty solid. He doesn't have this incredible ability to push the ball downfield, but he can make some throws in big spots. He likes to move and make plays, sometimes to a fault, bailing out of clean pockets. But he's a solid quarterback, definitely belongs as kind of a bridge starter. But do we think he's like the answer long term? I don't know. Steelers fans, you tell me. Derek Carr also here. He's been okay this season. He's played much better the last 2 weeks. I'll give him that. Getting more comfortable here. Actually getting a Raheed Shaheed involved, which is big. But I think he has played himself out of this next tier with some pretty stinky performances. And Derek Carr's inability down in the red zone really holds him back. Like, they get down there and he just freezes up. And that's another big difference between him and like a Kirk Cousins or a Jared Goff. So at the top of the bridge starter tier, but not going to quite crack this next group. So this next tier actually, which is our good quarterbacks, definite starters in the NFL, that kind of in a perfect situation could probably win a Super Bowl. But are they going to elevate that group? That's where you're going to see that difference between the good and the great quarterbacks. But I ended up having more quarterbacks in this tier than I expected. And it's kind of funny to see Deshaun Watson at the bottom of this tier. And he is still kind of given us a small sample size, but the sample size is growing in that when he plays, he is not that tier 1, tier 2 quarterback that the Browns thought they were getting. If anything, he might be playing much closer to like a Derek Carr or a Kenny Pickett, but still holding on to a thread of his previous success here, getting into this good tier, but at the very bottom of this tier. And does he even want to play football? I don't know. This shoulder injury situation has been very strange. I don't think he's a good character off the field. I'd be more than happy to see him continuing to fall. But it is very clear that the Browns offense is better with him in it as opposed to like a PJ Walker. I'll give him that. But let's move on. Russell Wilson, I actually think last year was such an outlier of bad performance for him relative to the rest of his career. Watching him this year, I actually feel pretty confident putting him in this tier, in that most of his traits, if you're checking boxes, scouting Russell Wilson, are kind of average to above average at this point, but he's not really doing anything at an elite level, Like accuracy's been good. Decision-making, I would say, average. Ability to protect the football, average. Explosive plays, good. He's not what he used to be, where he would take great care of the football. He would have these beautiful moon balls every single week. I think he has lost a little bit of his athletic juice that he used to count on to get out of the pocket. Those vintage Russell Wilson plays just haven't been there, and that's been just a huge upside that's been wiped off the board a little bit with Russ. But I also don't think he's playing at this colossal disaster level where it's like they have to get rid of him immediately, or he's holding the team back, or this is like the worst trade in the history of the NFL or anything like that. Definitely not a great trade, but he's settled in somewhere between what he was last year and his previous self. And I feel pretty solid about that. Then we got Brock Purdy. Purdy is so fascinating because we know the system does a lot of the heavy lifting, but you also have to credit Purdy for a lot of the good stuff he does himself, especially when it comes to play extension. When Kyle Shanahan doesn't dial up a wide open crossing route, or when it's not him throwing a bubble screen to McCaffrey or Debo who take it 60 yards to the house, he is pretty consistently getting out of the pocket, showing great instincts on the move. Watching him at Iowa State for years, he wore Mahomes' number and kind of moved like Mahomes and had a lot of his same mannerisms and had the same kind of rare instincts to see the field out of structure. He just doesn't have the rocket launcher attached to his, shoulder blade like Mahomes does. So, that's a limiting factor for Purdy. You don't really see him driving the ball 20 plus yards downfield. But he's been the perfect balance of benefiting from a good system, but also bringing stuff to the table himself. Now, he underratedly has put the ball in harm's way quite a lot, Some of that is accuracy issues where he's leaving the ball a little bit, too high, too behind, and you've got a closing defender that's able to make a play on the ball. Some of it is just not seeing defenders over the middle of the field, forcing throws. But other than that, I think he is a good quarterback and has the Niners in Super Bowl contention. Then Geno Smith, whose outlier season last year was not a complete fluke. They give him the contract, and I'd say he's paid it back. Now, he hasn't been, first half Geno from last year was like an MVP level quarterback. And then second half Geno last year was, I think, more of the guy we've seen this year, where he's going to make some big plays. He's very aggressive and has a short memory. And if he throws a pick, he's not going to change who he is and stop doing a lot of the good stuff he does. But he does put the ball in harm's way. And that's kind of what holds him back a little bit. It seems like every week there's one or two turnover-worthy plays in there, and it's just hard to be a tier 1 or tier 2 quarterback when that's every single week. But I still love Geno, has an underrated arm, underrated pocket presence, and I'm pulling for him, honestly, to go on kind of a deep playoff run. And, maybe the more and more he plays, he can show that he can take better care of the football and continue to climb up these rankings. Then we got the Kirk, Goff, Dak grouping. I feel pretty good about putting these guys together right now. Now, Kirk was playing, I think, the best football of his career before the horrible Achilles injury. Tough to know how much that's going to set him back in terms of his confidence. And, he was really just throwing with anticipation. Kind of was doing a Phillip Rivers impersonation the last few weeks with how ahead of the game he was with his processing. So Kirk was really impressing me. He got hurt at the absolute most tragic of times, which is kind of classic Minnesota sports. But hopefully he can see a full recovery. Was playing close to a top 10 quarterback level. And then Jared Goff, a couple weeks ago, I was talking Jared Goff up as if he was starting to enter tier 2 on this list. And the last 2 weeks, I would say he's, I don't want to say regressed, but done enough to make me feel good about leaving him in this tier. And I'm trying to word that in a way that's giving him his credit. Like a year ago, Jared Goff wouldn't have even been in this tier. He would have been down there with Daniel Jones and where Derek Carr is now. But he's been so consistent over the last 16 games that he is elevated to this group. And there's been parts of this season where he's looked like a Matthew Stafford for Detroit. But the last couple of weeks, that Ravens game, just not really having answers for pressure when the scheme is taken away. Does he bring things to the table? Not really. I mean, that's the big difference between really the great quarterbacks and the good ones. And then even that Raiders game, there's a couple missed throws, the bad interception. So he's cooled off a little bit from those first 6 weeks or so where he was playing at a great level. But that's kind of the deal with these good quarterbacks too, is they can any given week play at a great level, a tier 2 level. But do they do that consistently enough to remain in that tier? With Jared Goff, I would say no. And even with Dak Prescott, I would say no as well. Now, he is on a hot streak these last couple weeks, really since that embarrassing performance against the Niners. And, he's starting to flirt with, am I a great quarterback again? And I picked the Dallas Cowboys to beat the Eagles this weekend. I'm expecting Dak Prescott, if he's going to be this quarterback that, this is always the ranking, that Cowboys fans see this and they're like, you're a Dak hater and all this stuff. Just go do it. Go play great against a great team. Get her done. He's playing at that level right now, but do it when it counts. That's the thing with Dak Prescott that I still just leaves that piece to be desired. When he's on, he's one of the best decision makers in the league. His accuracy is exceptional. Love his processing. Love his footwork. He's been extending plays much better these last couple of weeks, which is another knock on him. Is feels like in the biggest moments, when it's 3rd and 8 and you need a play from him, more often than not, in previous seasons, it's been I'm just going to put this thing up for CD or put this thing up for Michael Gallup, let them make the play, instead of recognizing, hey, there's an escape lane. Let's step up. Let's get out of the pocket. Let's run for this first down, or let's, find a throwing lane that's a better probability pass. That's been something missing from Dak. He is playing really well the last couple of weeks, and if he can sustain that level, he will climb to the great tier. But that's the thing with Dak, is sustained greatness has not been there for him for a long time. So that's your tier 3. Now, there is a quarterback here that I'm going to kind of take a cop-out route and put him between these two tiers, and that's going to be Kyler Murray. I do think a healthy Kyler Murray, you go back to his last full season, he was the leading MVP candidate in the NFL. I do believe this is the most disrespected quarterback in the National Football League, Kyler Murray. Really excited for him to come back. I think the Cardinals have done some fun stuff around the quarterback in terms of the run game and the playmakers. I really want to see him prove the people wrong. But how healthy is that knee? How is he going to look within this new system here? I do firmly believe that Kyler Murray can play as a tier 2 quarterback because, in my opinion, for the majority of his career, he has earned a massive contract extension, by the way. But got to get healthy and prove that he belongs. So I'm going to take a bit of a cop-out route there and kind of leave him there. But let's get into tier 2. And surprisingly, at least for myself, I've got Tua in tier 2. He has really continued to impress me this year, building upon a lot of the great stuff he did last year. And another thing is, I've kind of learned to accept that there's a trade-off with how he plays. Once, maybe twice a game, he is going to predetermine a read and force a ball that will likely get intercepted, or at least should be intercepted. That's how he plays football. But when the trade-off is incredible anticipation, the ability to basically neutralize whether or not he has an offensive line, because it's not just him pushing the ball downfield. He'll push the ball downfield quickly. And of course, having Tyreek Hill helps that. Of course, having Jalen Waddle helps that. There's no denying that. But no quarterback really plays that way like Tua does. He's got this unique trait, and I think that does follow him back to Alabama, where he did have this trust in these playmakers that has built over time. The way I've viewed Tua as a quarterback has evolved, and he leads the NFL in big-time throws, and he also has shown pretty good, pocket presence and play extension. There's been a little spot here or there where he'll actually step up, evade the rush, make a throw on the move, and he's really good down in the red zone with that trait too. So there's enough great traits there with Tua that I've learned to kind of live with this idea that there's probably going to be an ugly interception every week. But when they're scoring this many points and are able to just kind of forget about it and bounce back so quickly, I'm comfortable with who Tua is as a quarterback. So I think that's giving Tua an immense amount of respect that I have not done yet on this channel. Dolphins fans will still find a way to say I'm too low on him, but Tua's been pretty damn great this season. As has Matthew Stafford. He's been kind of back to that Super Bowl run Matthew Stafford, where he was so comfortable within this offense. His ability to fire just piss missiles into the middle of the field is such an elite trait that he has within that offense that attacks it so consistently with good playmakers in that part of the field. It's been a really efficient offense there. Gets banged up again here with his thumb injury. That's always been a part of his game. And likewise with Tua, he might make some boneheaded decisions or spray a ball or whatever, maybe once a week. But Stafford, I think, has very easily re-cemented himself as a great quarterback after a bad year last year in a kind of garbage team situation. And then we've got Justin Herbert. And, it's easy to say the great things about Herbert. And he's turned into, I think because so many people, myself included, viewed him as not a great prospect, he's turned into this kind of untouchable quarterback where no Justin Herbert criticism is warranted. And there's no denying, he is a good processor. He's extremely accurate. He has a great arm. He belongs in this tier. But the lack of ability to step up in these big games, it's just starting to compound. And some might say that's lazy analysis, but the more and more I watch Justin Herbert, the more I'm kind of just screaming at my TV in these big situations dude, use your feet, or don't stare down that read on third down. That he self-imploded in the fourth quarter of that Chiefs game. They were right in that game. They were pound for pound, and then the fourth quarter hits. Justin Herbert just got tunnel vision. And I love Herbert. I want him to be this top 5 quarterback that a lot of Herbert defenders and Chargers fans say he is, but I'm not there with him right now. Great player, not an elite player. Then we got Jalen Hurts. I mean, he slips up in that Jets game, and I'm calling him out like, that was ugly. That was horrible. And then ever since then, he's just bounced back and had maybe his best stretch of football. Honestly, I mean, he just continues to impress, man. He continues to climb. I still think he has some deficiencies. I think there are times when he's not seeing the field the best. I think the biggest thing is pocket presence. Like sometimes he'll scramble too early. Sometimes he'll hang in these, like he's got these beautiful, amazing pockets. And that's another thing is he's just got this incredible surrounding cast. I don't think Jalen Hurts has shown that he can elevate a bad surrounding cast like the rest of these 5-6 quarterbacks ahead of him have. That's maybe another missing piece with Hurts, but yeah, there are some frustrating pocket presence moments with Hurts where he's scrambling too early or not sensing pressure, but overall, I mean, he's one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. He takes care of the football. He brings the rushing element as well when he's healthy. He's not healthy right now, but yeah, I mean, Hurts is a great quarterback. I have a hard time arguing against that at this point, as I maybe would have over a year ago. Then I've got Trevor Lawrence, who I think has had an underrated season. I do think you're really seeing the growth in his comfort within this offense here in year 3 for Trevor Lawrence. You got to remember that. I mean, he's the least experienced quarterback on this list. But yeah, I mean, he just makes 4 or 5 throws a week that make your jaw drop. And they're not necessarily like deep balls, 40, 50 yards down the field. It's these like cross-body, cross-hash, out-breaking throws where you see the velocity, you see his ability to read out these zones. And these, they're often like big throws on 3rd down, or he hits that. What game was it where he hits was that the Bills game? I think where he hits the fade to Ridley. I think that was I think it was the Bills game. But just big game-ending 3rd down, beautiful touch throw. He really commands the ball well. I think his processing and decision making is really entering the top collection of talent in the NFL. Now, there's still a little bit missing, like week to week. There's like he's out of sync on a back shoulder, or he's making a stupid interception. Like he had a pick against the Steelers where I'm like, Trevor, literally, what the hell were you looking at? Like he just threw it to 3 defenders in the red zone. Like there are still every other week some pretty questionable plays with Lawrence that I think are still holding him out of the elite tier. But I do think he's climbing and honestly playing underrated football this year because he's had a lot of drops and some frustrating moments for the offense, but some of them out of his control. Then I've got Lamar Jackson, who I'm very close to putting him up in that elite tier. Now, it's been so long that he's been that quarterback. I need to see a season's worth of elite quarterback play before I put anybody in the elite tier. Now, to be fair, we did see that in 2019, but that was a completely different version of this offense and of Lamar Jackson. Like a big part of his MVP season was what he brought with his feet and the play action and using those tight ends over the middle of the field and a bizarre touchdown percentage on his throws. Like he had like 36 touchdowns on a rare rate in terms of attempts that year. But anyway, Lamar this year has been the best case scenario of what you would have hoped to see in this spread style offense. And I've raved about him on my podcast and on the power rankings throughout the year. He's had some put the team on his back moments this year. And again, he is climbing. If he sustains this level of play, the next time we do this video, he's going to be in that elite tier. The pocket presence has been exceptional from him. Frustrating defenses with knowing when to run, how to manipulate pressure. His processing has been incredible. Just not really putting the ball in harm's way with his arm. Now, he's fumbling every week, which has been an issue, but he's not really making stupid decisions with the ball. The accuracy has been better than it's ever been in his career. So he's really been an elite quarterback so far this season, and I think belongs at the top of this great tier. Now, one quarterback we haven't mentioned yet is Aaron Rodgers. I'm also going to kind of take the easy way out here and float him between the elite tier and the great tier. I think we have now even more evidence that Green Bay was a disastrous situation. And he almost had that team in the playoffs last year. I said time and time again, like, he was playing with a broken thumb on a horrible offense and still was like the 10th best quarterback in the NFL. It's pretty damn hard to do. And then this year, I would have loved to see what he would look like on this Jets team. And maybe we still will. He was my 4th ranked quarterback heading into the year as well. It's tough to rank Aaron Rodgers right now because we don't know what he's going to look like when he comes back from that Achilles. Can he sustain health after this kind of rushed recovery? Very tough to know, but I'm going to kind of float him between the elite and great tier here. And then you've got kind of your consensus top 3. The only thing that might see some disagreements is whether it should be Burrow or Allen at 3 here. I've got Allen 3 just behind Joe Burrow, but these guys are neck and neck. Josh Allen, I will say, since the Jets game, has cleaned up his act. He's taken much better care of the football. I think he's getting more and more comfortable with this idea that when defenses are going to play two shell on him and force him to throw underneath, he's got to stay patient. He's got to use all these playmakers that they've given him underneath. Your Kincaid and Cook and some of these other outlet options. I like that last week they started using Gabe Davis on more than just deep routes as well, because if teams are going to take that away, you might as well have a counterpunch there, and he activated that. He got Gabe Davis involved. So, I think Allen's playing incredible football right now. They need him to be an elite quarterback and basically an MVP if they're going to be a Super Bowl type of team this year. I think he's got the potential to return the favor there. So I really don't have a bad thing to say about Josh Allen. But Joe Burrow, I don't think has really done anything to lose this spot. Of course, he played injured to start the year, but ever since he's come back healthy, he's done enough to erase that from your memory and say, yeah, when Joe Burrow is healthy, he is this elite quarterback. And he continues to just make one of my better draft takes continue to age well, where I said he's Tom Brady from the waist up in terms of mental capacity to read the defense and arm talent, and Aaron Rodgers from the waist down in terms of improvisational ability and mobility and athleticism and pocket presence and all that stuff. Like, Joe Burrow's just so freaking fun, man. That blowout against the Niners was just a reminder of how great a healthy Joe Burrow is. And then you got Patrick Mahomes. I mean, there's a time and a place to analyze Patrick Mahomes, I'm sure. I broke him down in the last couple of podcasts, but, we're 40 minutes into this video at this point. Mahomes is the best quarterback in football. No one's going to argue it. He's out there with, nobody at wide receiver. He does have Kelsey, of course, but, Mahomes he's one. He's, it's almost like 1A and then 1B with these other elite quarterbacks. No one's going to argue that Patrick Mahomes isn't the best quarterback in the NFL. If you are, you're probably just a Bills or a Bengals fan. I don't know what else to tell you. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm sure there's going to be disagreements with my list, so let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I appreciate you guys for watching, for hearing me out, and we'll see you guys for the next one. Peace out.